In the soft glow of twilight, as the disciples chase a firefly through the fading light, Jesus reveals a deeper truth. What we chase in life is not always what we need, and the brightest light is often found within. The evening was descending quietly over the land of Galilee, bringing with it a calmness after a long, intense day of traveling and teaching. Jesus and his disciples were weary, their sandals dusty from the roads they had walked and their hearts still resonating with the miracles they had witnessed. The sun, now low on the horizon, cast a final warm glow over the hills, painting the sky in hues of pink and amber, while the cool breeze from the Sea of Galilee brought a welcome relief from the heat of the day. The disciples found a grassy hillside and settled there to rest. The field was quiet, with only the sound of distant birds returning to their nests and the gentle rustling of leaves in the trees. The day had been filled with crowds, people seeking healing, answers, and wisdom from Jesus. Now, in the silence of the approaching night, the disciples were grateful for this peaceful moment to be alone with their teacher. They sat in a circle around Jesus, some reclining on the soft grass, others quietly talking among themselves. The air was still warm but carried the promise of the cool night ahead. Above them, the first few stars began to twinkle faintly, like distant fires in the vastness of the sky. As the last light of day faded, something small and glowing caught Andrew's eye. "Look," he whispered, pointing out across the field. The other disciples followed his gaze and soon saw it too, a tiny flicker of light hovering just above the tall grass. A single firefly had emerged, glowing faintly at first, then brighter as it floated closer to where they sat. At first, the firefly's light was soft and distant, but it grew brighter as it moved closer, its glow flickering rhythmically. The disciples, still tired from the day's events, found their attention drawn to this small, glowing creature. Its delicate light contrasted with the gathering darkness, and soon the firefly became the focal point of their evening. James, always full of energy and curiosity, was the first to stand. "A firefly," he said with a grin, his eyes bright with excitement. "Let's catch it." Peter, who never passed up an opportunity for a challenge, stood as well. "We'll catch it for sure," he declared, his usual confidence spilling into his voice. He rubbed his hands together as though preparing for a contest. The other disciples, feeling a sudden burst of energy despite their earlier fatigue, quickly joined in, laughing and joking as they all stood and began to chase the firefly. It flitted through the air, its light blinking on and off, teasing them with its erratic flight. The disciples spread out across the field, trying to anticipate its movements, their hands reaching for the elusive glow. "Almost got it," Andrew called out, lunging forward. But the firefly darted away at the last second, slipping through his fingers as though it had a mind of its own. Peter, ever determined, ran faster, his eyes locked on the little light. "This way," he shouted to the others, pointing as the firefly changed direction. They all followed, their laughter filling the evening air as they ran after the flickering light. But the firefly, small and quick, easily evaded their grasp. Every time one of them thought they were close, it would dart to the side or lift just out of reach, leaving them to grasp at empty air. Its light blinked teasingly, glowing for a moment before disappearing, only to reappear in a completely different spot. As the chase continued, the disciples began to grow tired. What had started as a fun and playful pursuit was now turning into a frustrating game. Their laughter faded, replaced by the sound of heavy breathing and the occasional grunt of frustration. The firefly, still glowing and blinking in the distance, seemed to mock their efforts, always just beyond their reach. Peter, his face flushed from the chase, finally stopped. He bent over, hands on his knees, trying to catch his breath. "This thing's impossible," he exclaimed, wiping the sweat from his forehead. "How can something so small be so hard to catch?" The others soon followed, collapsing into the grass, panting and shaking their heads. Their initial excitement had worn off, leaving them exhausted and empty-handed. The firefly, still dancing through the air, flickered away into the night, its glow growing fainter as it disappeared into the distance. They sat in the grass, their breaths heavy, their earlier enthusiasm replaced with a mix of frustration and amusement. They had chased the firefly so eagerly, convinced they could catch it, only to find it always slipping away. Jesus, who had been watching them from the hilltop, smiled gently. He had observed their chase in silence, knowing the lesson they were about to learn. His eyes twinkled in the fading light as he motioned for them to return to him. "Come, sit with me," he said, his voice gentle and full of warmth. The disciples, still catching their breath, made their way back to where Jesus sat. They gathered around him, some sitting cross-legged on the grass, others reclining as they wiped the sweat from their foreheads. Their hearts still raced from the chase, but now they were quiet, ready to listen. Peter, as usual, was the first to speak. "Master," he began, shaking his head in disbelief, "we tried to catch it, but no matter how fast we ran, it always stayed just out of reach." Jesus smiled, his expression full of understanding. "Why did you chase the firefly?" he asked softly. Peter paused, then shrugged. "Because it was beautiful. Its light was bright and we wanted to hold it, to bring it close." The others nodded in agreement. The firefly's light had been captivating, so small yet so bright. There was something enchanting about it, something that had drawn them in without a second thought. Jesus' smile deepened, and he looked at them with eyes full of love and wisdom. "Let me tell you a story," he said, his voice calm and soothing as the night settled around them. "There was once a young boy," Jesus began, "who lived in a small village near the sea. Every evening he would sit outside and watch the fireflies as they filled the fields with their light. He loved their glow, so bright and mysterious. One night, he decided that he must catch one for himself. If I can hold this light in my hands, he thought, I will be happy. The disciples, still catching their breath from their chase, listened closely. They could see themselves in the boy already. So the boy ran through the fields, following the glowing lights as they flickered in the dark. Jesus continued. He chased them for hours over the hills, through the tall grass, even down to the shore. But no matter how hard he tried, he could never catch one. By the time the sun began to rise, the boy was exhausted. He had spent the entire night chasing the fireflies, and now he had nothing to show for it. He sat down by the sea, his heart heavy with disappointment. Jesus paused, letting his words sink in. The disciples were silent, already feeling the familiar sting of chasing something that slips through your fingers. As the boy sat there, an old fisherman came by. Jesus said, continuing the story. The fisherman saw the boy's sadness and asked him what was wrong. The boy told him about his quest to catch the firefly's light. The fisherman smiled kindly and said, You've been chasing the wrong thing. The firefly's light is beautiful, but it is not meant to be caught. Look around you, boy. The true light, the light that will make you happy, is already here. It's in the rising sun, in the waves of the sea, in the love of those around you. You've spent your night chasing a fleeting spark, but the real light has been with you all along. Jesus' words hung in the air, and the disciples felt the weight of the story settle into their hearts. They understood. They had been like the boy, chasing something that wasn't meant to be caught, believing that if they could just grasp it, they would find happiness. We often chase things that seem bright and beautiful, Jesus said, his voice filled with compassion. Things that we believe will bring us happiness, wealth, power, recognition, fleeting pleasures. But like the firefly, these things are fleeting. They shine brightly for a moment, but they fade away just as quickly, leaving us empty. The disciples sat in silence, reflecting on the many things they had chased in their lives, things they thought would bring them joy, fulfillment, purpose, but that had only left them wanting more. Jesus smiled gently at them. The light you seek is not out there in the world. It is not something you can catch or hold in your hands. The true light, the light that lasts, is already with you. It is the light of wisdom, of love, of truth. It is within you, waiting to guide you, if only you stop chasing the things that cannot last. Tears welled up in the eyes of some of the disciples, not out of sadness but from a deep sense of being seen, of being understood. For so long they had searched for meaning, for purpose, believing it was just beyond their reach. And now, in the simple act of watching a firefly, Jesus had revealed to them the deeper truth they had longed for. Peter, usually the first to speak, was silent this time, his heart full of gratitude. He had spent so much of his life chasing after things that did not last, always believing that the next catch, the next accomplishment, would finally bring him peace. But now, sitting before his teacher, he realized that the peace he sought had been with him all along. The firefly, which had once seemed so important, now felt small and insignificant. Its light, though beautiful, could never compare to the light of wisdom and love that Jesus had shared with them. As the night grew darker, the disciples stayed close to Jesus, their hearts full of a new understanding. They no longer felt the need to chase after fleeting lights. They had found something far more precious, the light that would guide them through all the days of their lives. And in that moment, under the vast, starry sky, they realized they didn't need to catch the light. They only needed to follow it. This is end of the story. Comment Amen if you believe in Jesus' blessings. Please like this video and subscribe this channel for more Jesus story like this. May the God watch over you.